right, let's make this snappy.
Welcome to Emotion Ships, where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason. I am your host, Charlie Carroll, along with my comprehensive co-host, Mallory Redmond.
Right.
Now, welcome to the program, Special Election Edition. And there's another reason this edition is special.
What's that?
It's the Gelman birthday edition.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Gel.
Gail, how old did you turn?
He can never remember.
Oh, neither can I. Who cares?
Who cares? Age is just a number, you guys.
Yeah, it's more about how you feel.
That's true.
How do you feel, Mal?
I feel
Welcome back.
great.
Out on the road?
I feel great and young and vibrant.
Oh, yeah. Let your cells hear all of that.
Oh, I thought you said yourselves.
No, your cells.
Cells. Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you feeling? More importantly.
I'm a little stiff.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I was on the way home from the airport last night, CVG, Cincinnati, driving north.
How fast were you going?
Probably 40.
Oh.
I was going slower because there was traffic when a young gentleman tried to...
Do you want to call out his name?
No, definitely not. Poor guy.
Poor guy. Nobody won in this.
He was going too fast.
Uh-huh.
I would say he had to be going 80 miles an hour. And he did not realize that we had all slowed down in front of him. And so I saw him trying to pump the brakes. I had about a half-second notice. And he hit me really hard.
That's the worst when you know you're about to be hit.
Yeah.
What'd you do? Did your life flash before your eyes? What'd you see?
I saw him coming in super hot. And so I turned the nose of my car to the left so that he would hit the corner of the Range Rover versus straight. And I mean, thankfully, our vehicle is very heavy, whereas he was in a Tucson, which is not so heavy. And
not so heavy.
His airbag deployed, I mean, to show you how fast he was going, and he busted up his hand, but everybody was okay. My neck
Did you say anything like in that half second? Tell me what happened.
No, I did not have time to.
You didn't say anything? You didn't think anything except, did you think you were going to?
The thought was we're going to get hit. That was definitely the thought. And then
did like all of your regrets in life come flashing before your eyes?
Maybe it says something about my soul because I had no thoughts about all of my decisions.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's probably a good thing.
Yeah. And so I knew that you want to turn the car a little bit and not take it head on per se.
Yes.
And so, it worked. I'm going to have to get our car fixed. That's for sure.
Right. And maybe your neck.
That too. Yeah. So
I'm glad you're okay.
Thank you.
That's really scary.
Our compassionate co-host, everyone.
Oh.
Mallory Redmond.
You've
already achieved.
Yeah. Good.
But I did say comprehensive, which compassion probably is tied up in that.
I don't really know what you mean by comprehensive.
This is a special edition for the podcast today.
Do I even need to be here?
Yes. We are talking about the election.
The election.
The election is here.
It's happening.
It's here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about predictions. But first, how about some of the news people are reading these days, like Ice Cube sitting down with Jared Kushner, I believe that's how you say his last name, our president's son-in-law, to talk about what has now become the platinum deal, or maybe they're calling it platinum package, where...
That sounds fancy. You stick the word platinum in front of basically anything.
I think of strip clubs.
Oh. Okay.
I don't know why.
That's not what I think of.
I don't know why, but I do.
Interesting.
Just being honest.
Do you want to unpack that a little bit?
No, not at all.
Okay.
But that being said, Ice Cube requested to sit down with both presidential parties. Mr. Biden told him, Vice President Biden told him that they would get with him after the election.
He's got things to do.
And the president put his son-in-law on it and said, hey, let's sit down. And I guess from what I read, the idea of the meeting was about the black community and wanting to invest money into the black community from the bottom up, addressing schools and families. And it turned out to be a $500 billion commitment that I guess Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, is a very talented young businessman.
Okay. I don't know very much about him.
Well, he's been essential. I don't either, in fairness, but he's been
definitely don't know how to say his last name.
That too.
Just rolling with it.
He's been at the forefront of some of these international deals. You know, President Trump was nominated for a peace award. What's it called?
The Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah, there you go. Peace. Thank you.
I didn't know if it was like a...
No, you're right. You got it. And that was with this deal that was brokered between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, I believe. Yes.
Are you asking or?
No, I'm telling.
Okay.
That being said, so Ice Cube wanted to sit down, and I guess there's this platinum deal that's
now we're
happening.
All thinking of strip clubs.
Well, and so I don't know then if you saw the news where 50 Cent came out and said,
just don't say it normal.
Okay, 50 Cent came out and said he is endorsing the president because he doesn't want to be 20% or 20 cent. I'm killing it.
Do you want to start the sentence over? Go ahead. Yeah. Give it another go.
Yeah. So 50 Cent came out and said he doesn't want to be 20 cent because of Biden's tax proposal where the ultra wealthy are going to be taxed. And so he came out. And then to make the news even more exciting, his former lover, who is an American comedian, she came out.
Do we know her?
I did not know her, but I'm sure you would.
Okay. Are you saying just American comedian because you don't remember her name?
Correct.
Oh, gotcha.
But she's known.
Okay.
She came out and said, "You are no longer my former ex-boyfriend because of this nonsense. And if you will renounce your allegiance to President Trump, I will pay your 2020 taxes." And so he came out, came out and said, F Trump.
Okay. So it wasn't a super strong allegiance.
I think that was her point. And but that being said, I wonder how much he owed in 2019 taxes.
Yeah. I mean, enough that made it worthwhile.
Yeah. So that's what he did. And just a glimpse of where we're at.
There's a lot happening.
Yes. I saw a recent poll saying there's about 5 points between Vice President Biden in the polls being up and President Trump.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't think it's real. Okay. I think it's very similar to 2016, and I could be very wrong.
That's always a possibility.
Doesn't happen often.
Not too often, but
it is a possibility.
I appreciate you acknowledging that.
Hillary Clinton was about the same 5 points up in the polls when 2016 happened. And the thing that I look at most is enthusiasm. And I think there's a lot of enthusiasm out there on the ground.
Sorry, Gelman's trying to get in touch with me.
Oh, well, that's why he's a great producer of this podcast.
He just sent a script.
He put a bug in your ear?
No, he just sent this. He sent this screenshot from an article about Chelsea. So is Chelsea Handler the ex?
Yes, she's the ex.
Yeah, I know her.
I knew you'd know her.
Yeah. You don't know her?
No. Name's familiar.
Chelsea Handler. She's not a Republican.
Yeah. Well, clearly.
Yeah.
She's willing. I wonder if I could get her to pay my taxes.
I mean, maybe if you renounce any allegiance to Trump.
Okay.
It might be all it takes.
Chelsea, if you're out there listening.
Chelsea, give us a call.
Call me up.
937-303-4788.
Nailed it.
Perfect.
And so looking at enthusiasm, it appears as if there is so much more enthusiasm out there toward the president. Now, not all of it is positive, which I think is what gives Vice President Joe Biden even a chance in the first place. But I don't think he has a chance.
What did you call
honestly.
it? Enthusiasm?
Yeah, enthusiasm.
Which we could call it energy.
Yeah. Oh,
being
for sure.
That we're on Emotion Ships, the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think it's energy, and I see a ton of it for President Trump. Now, the caveat to that is here in the last several weeks, Vice President Biden is significantly out fundraising the president, which shows you there is a little bit of energy. No one will elect or vote for Vice President Biden this year. I think it really is a vote against Trump.
I'm like, I don't think that's true. People will vote for him.
In most cases, I think it's really a vote against the president
Gotcha.
more than it is
I could see that.
a vote for the current president. But I think as you're sitting up looking at the election results coming in, I do think there's going to be that much more of a gap between President Trump and Vice President Biden compared to President Trump and former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton.
Okay, so because some people are just listening, can you say what you were just trying to show? You think there will be a bigger gap?
Yeah, I do. I think that the president will end up winning by more than he won when he was running in 2016. That's my thought. By looking at the enthusiasm out there on the ground, I mean, if you look at these in-person rallies that he's having, in some cases people are getting hours worth of notice and still 10,000 plus people are showing up. And so one of the things that I think is very interesting to think about, if somebody said, okay, justify your thoughts about this. My thoughts are this. In this country, there's this diabolic reality that I think a lot about, that we say and believe every voice deserves to be heard, right? That the priority of the individual voice. And yet, as a culture, we don't really live that way. But we live into the counterfeit side of that, which is the people that are the celebrity voices, or for whatever reason do have a little bit of the nation's attention because of a skill or an experience that they have. We tend to listen to those voices, but the problem with it is we make a bigger deal of it than we should, because it's not anchored to that being a reality that is unconditional across our American culture, right? So we'll say that everybody deserves to be heard, but the truth of the matter is it's a lot of us lean toward only listening to the voices that we want to listen to, or that on the surface seem like they can give more entertainment, more value, more wisdom to us. And for that reason, getting back to the election, that's why I think moments like this, there can be such differing results on election day versus the polls, because we have a tendency as human beings to amplify the voices that we need to hear or that we want to hear, versus in a lot of cases, the voices that really matter. And I think what we saw in 2016, where they called it the red wave, where President Trump went in and won in states that no one, like Wisconsin, no one expected him, or Michigan, no one expected him to win. It's almost the voices that haven't been heard, that know they deserve to be heard, that come out and say something. And it explains, in my opinion, it can explain why there can be such a stark difference between what popular opinion is, right? Which we're all hearing this, F Trump, I don't like Trump, Trump's the problem, get rid of Trump. That tends to be coming from a lot fewer voices, but it's the common, easy thing to either live into or not push back on. But then when the time of reckoning comes, you see that a lot of voices that are not heard because they're just in the middle, make themselves known, make themselves heard.
Didn't he not? I thought he lost the popular, or like the popular vote. Is that the term? I thought that Hillary Clinton got more votes. Is that not true?
Go to the Google. Let's go to the Google. We can do this in real time.
Well, because it's weird. I mean, there's like the electoral.
Yeah, college.
Gelman, can you? What? She got more votes? So I feel like that.
We're confirming it.
Okay. I think that, to me, do you think that changes anything you just said?
No, not at all. Because if you go to California or you go to New York, where there are a lot more people culturally that are culturally exposed to media and the general message consensus out there, versus middle America, where there are, and this was the point of the Electoral College, that you spread out influence so that people that are living in tight, condensed areas cannot speak for the whole nation, especially when, if you go to Iowa and you look at what's real in Iowa versus New York City, where there's as many people in New York City or close to it, 11 million people, probably not anymore here post-pandemic or in the middle of the pandemic. There's almost as many people in Manhattan as there are in the whole state of Ohio. And so if you just take that idea with where culture is being created or where celebrity lifestyles are more known or more prevalent, then you could easily see how more people living in a condensed area could buy into a message that doesn't equally represent a large parcel of land like the whole country. So I don't think.
I mean, but we're just saying that if every
voice deserves to be heard.
I mean, Hillary Clinton got nearly 3 million more votes.
Yeah.
It's just a little. The whole thing is a little wonky. I understand what you're saying. I understand the Electoral College. I understand all of that. And when you were talking about every voice, I mean,
deserves to be heard.
2.87 million people did voice their opinion, and it wasn't heard.
Sure.
I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's not black and white.
No, I don't think it's black and white by any means, but it just comes back to you're trying to get an idea with Electoral College. You're trying not to let heavily populated or dense areas speak for the whole country. You're trying to take you're putting different values on segments of, call it a company or an organization, so that the marketers and the salespeople don't drive the whole business because they are wired and engineered a certain way that they have loud voices. They have bright eyes and loud voices. And you want them and you need those bright eyes and loud voices. But it just comes back to then trying to create space for something that's not as prevalent, but just as important, like the liver or the heart in the body, and allow their voice to be heard as well. And as you know, if you're listening to this, it's not as if we live into politics being the answer, or politicians even, whether it's conservative or liberal, Democratic or Republican. We here at Emotion Ships, the podcast, don't live into the idea that any form of top-down leadership is going to work in place of bottom-up, where the people at the top place themselves in environments where things need to change and grow, and they grow with them and beside them versus legislating from the top down. So don't be confused just because we're talking about the election that we think it's all about politicians or politics. However, it is fun to look at and talk through some of these things because politicians have to use energy to leverage and get votes, right? All of these messages as to you need to be taken care of. You shouldn't be left behind. Your voice matters. I mean, that's what politicians are leveraging. I saw someone this morning say on Instagram that don't forget that even social media is the transfer of energy. And so if you're tired all the time, it's because we tend to forget that words are a source of energy. Pictures are a source of energy. And we only have so much each and every day. And it's life can throw some curveballs at you. It's difficult to manage the energy.
Yeah, for sure.
But we're living in a day and age where 50 Cent says he doesn't want to become 20 Cent because there is a system that Joe Biden was speaking to. I don't know if you saw the 60-minute interview with him, and he was talking about his tax plan where he wants to tax the ultra wealthy at 36%, which that's really tough. I think one of the things that people don't realize about business owners is just because they have a certain amount of money doesn't mean that cash flows or that they have access to all of that money. Most of that money, in a lot of cases, unless you're like Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or some people that have a lot of cash in reserves. In most cases, if you are part of the upper class and you have a net worth of 5 or 10 or 15, $20 million, in a lot of cases, your business might be soaking all of that up. Cash flow is different than what your net worth is. A lot of people have a decent net worth, but you still feel poor. I was recently filling out an application for more life insurance, and they asked me what my net worth was. And I had to think about it, what I thought my net worth was. And it was, I don't know, most people would say it's a nice number, but yet I often feel poor because I'm putting a lot of my resources, whether it's my time and energy or whether it's my money, into businesses. And so when somebody comes knocking and says, hey, you've got a $60,000 tax bill or whatever it is, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have access to that cash, especially when you have multiple businesses that have varying needs and unexpected needs at different times. What's happening over
I'm
there?
just trying to figure out where I want to go with this, because I hear you and I agree with you, and I think it's a good important point, because being someone who's not super familiar with the ultra wealthy,
Sure,
I don't take that into consideration a lot. However, I do think there's something to be said for what people who do have some money or in a higher tax bracket, what they're spending their money on.
Sure.
I mean, like, you live in a nice house, you have nice cars. And my husband and I were recently, I want a different car. And so we were looking at like more luxury vehicles.
Yeah.
And I finally decided, like, I don't really want to be car poor right now.
Sure.
Like, I like being able to have money to do some other things. And so I'd
Sure.
rather get like not such an fancy car in order to have the ability to do some other things. And so I think there is something to be said for that. Like, people that are wealthier, while they might not have the cash flow, like, a lot of people choose to live a lifestyle that reflects wealth.
Yeah, for sure. And the question becomes, when we realize that, because there's no doubt that there is a system, right? And you can, if you have enough money, you can buy access to attorneys and accountants that keep what you pay into the system, right, tax-wise, very, very low. And so that exists.
Yeah.
But here's the reality of it. There are plenty of people. I heard a quote the other day that said, in fighting monsters, make sure you don't become one. And anybody that has had responsibility or that has ran to the fire to try to help people know what that feels like. And there are countless politicians, I mean, a large majority of them, that have ran to the fire or to the system because they saw that it had issues. And when they pushed and nothing happened, but yet the whole time they started having things thrown at them and opportunities offered to them, they accidentally become a part of the monster that they were trying to get rid of. And so then you don't see such things like a flat tax, where no matter what, you're going to pay, 10% of your taxes, no matter what, right? If I were a political candidate and I could just snap my fingers, I would say, let's do a flat tax that everybody pays, whatever, 10%. Some people have advocated that if everyone actually paid, you could do it 8% and we would be better off. What Vice President Biden was referring to about taxing the ultra wealthy at 36%, the reason for that is because they will get some people to pay that, but people that know, right, that know somebody or that knows how to hire the right attorneys or the right accountants, they don't pay that. And so it's the system that ends up giving people breaks. And that's why you see, things in the news about politicians or politicians' children like Hunter Biden doing these deals with other country, and money is coming to them because there's a system to be maintained. That's what you leverage. What?
Nothing. You're just...
Do I believe that's real?
No, it's just the examples that you're using. You clearly have a political leaning that is.
It happens on both sides.
I agree.
It happens on both sides. Those are the most relevant ones that are in the news.
I agree.
That's what's being talked about right now.
The flat tax, I mean, that's super interesting because, I mean, that's not something we run a church.
Sure.
And so, like, when talking about tithing, for example, I mean, that's not, is that some, I mean, that's a.
Well, yeah, that's a great question and fun place to go, right? Like, what would the church or what did Jesus seem to be an advocate for?
Mm-hmm.
And the Bible advocates for giving out of your abundance and give with a joyful heart, knowing that God rewards cheerful givers.
Right.
So that's kind of the biblical admonition there. What you see practically happening, especially in a tough time in the book of Acts, which is the history book of the New Testament, is that everybody was selling everything they had and lumping their resources into a pool, and then the apostles were distributing it equally. But if you did not need something, they did not give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where you see the idea of a fair tax or a flat tax in place, that here's a baseline that everybody's going to give in order to take care of people that are in a tough time, because we all find ourselves and get ourselves into a tough time. And so I think you could do a flat tax where everybody pays 8% or 10%, no matter what. There are absolutely no exceptions. And what Vice President Biden was advocating for on 60 Minutes, he said, if everybody just paid their taxes, we would be better. But because they're not, we have to tax the ultra wealthy, and it will create this much more money. What's he really saying there? He knows that there's a system that cannot be destroyed, a political system that scratches people's backs. And those are the scenarios where the wealthy get wealthier. Mm-hmm. And what is the answer? The answer is for politicians to go to Washington and not be swayed, and for somebody to get in place and just say that in this specific instance, we're getting rid of the system, and the system is something that allows people to move money into offshore accounts or to arrange deals with countries that we don't have an agreement with, where taxes are not paid. And the politicians, the very people in power on both sides, are the people that could, at least with this component, the tax system of the system, could make a difference and just say it doesn't matter. And therefore, if you're making, $100 million a year, you're going to pay 10% on that. And that will be a reflection of you doing your part based on where you are right now. Mm-hmm. If you're on welfare and you're getting, $1,000 a month, you're going to pay 10% on that. And that's your way, reflecting where you are right now, of contributing to the system. What we don't do well is we don't understand that even if you are only making $1,000 a month, you still need to contribute to the needs of others based on where you're at.
Sure.
And so,
but here's the thing: is that
sure.
A lot of people have different ideas of what their needs are.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if all the money is pooled, and I think I need money to go on vacation for my mental health, whereas the person next to me just needs money to buy groceries for their kid.
Yeah.
I mean, we both could argue we have a need.
Yeah, for sure. And so then what you're talking about and what you're bringing up is the other side of the equation. What we were originally talking about is the money that comes into the system. And I hate using the word system because it's corrupt, but it is a system. What you just brought up is, what do we do to determine who gets those pooled resources? Like, we're talking about outflow in that situation, which is a really interesting idea. And it comes back to what are the parameters, or what is the baseline agreement? And I think where I would take that, if I were president, is let's come up with these 20 things or these 25 things and bring a tremendous amount of clarity and definition to, as an American citizen, what are you entitled to? What do you deserve? And my conservative friends would have a problem with me saying something about universal health care or the government taking care of healthcare. But here's the thing. I think it can be done. I think it can be done in a way that, everything is data these days, that it's all about data, that information is power. And I think we could do it in a way and have everyone's healthcare costs taken care of by them exchanging and sharing their data in a safe way that helps us better understand what health and wellness looks like, not only for an individual, but for communities in different climates and with what people are eating. And then if government were willing to get into agriculture and the healthcare system and let that data drive our food system and drive our healthcare system, then I think we would all be better off. But what we're still coming up against is the whole idea of there are people that are in control and that have power, and they don't want to destroy the very system that is feeding them.
For sure.
But you could set up a scenario where in exchange for your health data, your healthcare services are paid for. And someone would say, well, what does that look like, or how is that fair? Because, and where does freedom of choice come in, right, with all of this, which we tend to have a really hard time thinking through how to pursue capitalism, but still have a general level of agreements that allow people to be taken care of in society. But if you exchanged your data and you were willing to give up your data, that would include what you're putting in your mouth and what you're doing with your physical body. If you don't care what you eat, right, or you're not committed to your own health and to self-care and to getting steps in and working out, then I think you should pay a different price on your insurance premiums than somebody that is committed to taking care of themselves.
Okay, but you know as well as I do that people that are living in poverty, like extreme stress,
sure,
they do not have access to good food.
Sure.
Think of like the single parent who's working a number of jobs and trying to raise their kids. They are not positioned to.
They're not positioned right now because the tail has been wagging the dog, right?
So what comes first?
We have to start with some changes and start making them and getting them out, because that's what I was referring to, that if I were president, I would come up with, here are the 12 things that as an American citizen that you're entitled to. The first example I gave was healthcare, but in that there would have to be, you are entitled to, or you have the right to have access to food that will feed your body and promote life and health. And someone will say, well, that's not the government's job. Well, you've got to stop and think for a minute that the people that have been born over the last, just say even 25 years, they were born into a system. They did not have a choice. They were born into that. And based on generationally where they're at and what they were born into, not everybody starts at the same place. Not everybody has the same advantages. And so what policies within the system do we have to create now to try to bring everyone up to level ground and let them start from a place where they can at least have a chance to be successful? And that's not, that's a very tough task, but it just comes down to, if you're listening to me right now and you have a problem with me saying that the government has the right or should be looking for where the bottom is and giving special attention to those that are disadvantaged or that are less fortunate than a baseline, like, I don't know what your motivation is for that. Like, that's the responsibility of those that are in charge to look out for. And you're always going to have this. There's always going to be, no matter what, in a company, in a family, in a civilization, there's always going to be the bottom of the totem pole. And it's not fair, and it's really, really ignorant and immature to think that everybody, and this is common in Christian culture, that we are so morally driven, and really it's performance driven in disguise as morals and beliefs. But we look at the bottom, quote unquote, bottom of the totem pole and people that are struggling with certain things in certain areas, and we make a judgment on them that they want to be there. If I had $1 over the last 15 years for everyone that told me the people that are at the bottom are there because they want to be there, I would be rich. And we just don't understand that in the same way there are going to be highs and lows in our own life, there is always going to be a portion of the culture that is at the bottom, because that's the way the system works. It elevates people, and there are people that descend in that system. And a good government doesn't need to make anyone rich. They just need to be able to help them have the tools they need to make the best choices possible. And so my only thing about that is don't call it socialism. It's a commitment of a government to those that are disadvantaged or their voice is no longer heard. And my whole thing about it is the role of the church is supposed to be cultivating a mentality where we do it out of the goodness of our heart. We're motivated. It's not a mandate. That's what I really think. If the church, Catholic, Protestant church, both we're doing our job in really understanding the power of service and going to the least of these, right, the poor, and that's what Jesus said, you'll have the poor with you always, then we wouldn't have to look to government as a solution. We would be giving of our resources freely and naturally because we see a reflection of those people in ourselves, right? There's poverty in all of us.
I think that's a reason why it's so important to expose yourself to some diversity, because just in the way that, like, based on which media outlet I'm following or even like who I'm following on social media, I could get really convinced that, like, there's no way that Donald Trump is going to win this election, or that Joe Biden's going to win this election. Like, you listen to the voices that say that have the strongest opinions. And so I think when, in terms of this conversation, if you are just exposing yourself to people like you're like, everybody has my problems.
Yeah, for sure.
And you have no idea. I mean, I don't even have a full idea of the hurdles that people face in this country. Like, it's incredible, the level of diversity in this country. And we can be so blind to it when we're so just conditioned to think that everybody's life is kind of like ours.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and from a political standpoint, I think people get so worked up and so fired up because there is something in us that doesn't want to miss out or be left behind or not provided for. Sure. And so there's almost this rat race where you're almost conditioned to have to step on others to keep up and not be left behind, even if that's just with your thoughts. And so what's the emotion ship? It's probably something like the fear of abandonment, scarcity, not having enough, disappointment, right? And so we get so fired up, and people need to stop and just think about this for a second. Something has to be driving those strong emotions. And typically there's an object to the deep feelings we have. And in this case, a lot of cases, we're told that politicians and government have the most potential for making change. And so instead of doing the one thing that we can do, which is make a change in someone else's life today, we kind of farm that out and look to the systems that exist, even though in a lot of cases, there's a lack of justice and they're unfair. We still empower those systems by behaving in a way and putting energy out into the world that says they are our hope, and they're not our hope.
Yeah. I mean, what's like the line between, like, I'm not saying F the system, but like, I feel like I am empowering the system by doing what the system tells me, right? Like,
well, you have no choice. And if you've never gone against the system, you will see really quickly that you can lose your identity. I think it was one of the first 3 episodes on Emotion Ships, the podcast, where I told my story of going to prison or this high risk facility. And what was amazing about it is the moment you lose your wallet, like your wallet and your phone are taken from you, most people have no idea what it feels like to no longer have an identity and to be just a number. One of the most eye-opening experiences in all of my life, because here I am running multiple businesses and have a certain amount of wealth coming in and therefore influence and people that listen to me and making decisions all day long. In a moment's notice, all of that was taken from me and I was nothing more than just a number. And until you've felt that before, you don't know. It doesn't matter trying to get there and imagine what it feels like until you have been there, where your voice and your opinion doesn't matter no matter what your experience is. You don't know. So
that's what I'm saying is, like, now you do know. And
sure.
So what do you do to, like, dismantle the injustice of that system?
The easiest way to, and again, I believe this with all of my heart, the easiest way, it's the long way, but it's the most effective way to dismantle the system is take its power. And the way you take its power is not by putting another person in a person's position that you didn't like. You take its power by meeting the need that it's meeting. And so this is why in church history, you see the early church running into Rome, which was the most powerful nation in the world at the time, and they're taking care of their sick and their poor. Disease had broken out in Rome, and the Christians, very similar to this pandemic, probably just much, much worse because of the lack of medicine in the day. The Christian culture of that time believed Christ's words that you could come in contact with disease and it would not harm you. And so they ran into Rome basically to be, medical missionaries and to take care of these people that were dying from disease. And it had such an impact on the citizens of Rome that they call a special council, and you hear me talk about it all the time, saying, what are we going to do with these poor Galileans that are running in, and everybody is trusting them because they're meeting a need? And so the answer is, you got to know how to fight the monster that is much bigger than you. And sometimes the only way to do it is by taking its power one piece at a time. And the way each of us do that versus, and I'm for people voting their values. I'm for that. I'm for, entrepreneurs and business owners getting into governing positions because they've used their own money and they have experience, like, with risk. I'm all for, trying to get people in those political positions that will promote things like a flat tax, where everyone can have a chance, so on and so forth. But that being said, what do we do while we wait and pray for that to happen? And the answer is, and again, you've heard me say it so much this year, the government cannot be the problem until you make it the solution. It is the problem right now because we've made it the solution. So how do you keep government from being the primary solution that people look to and therefore give a lot of power to? You start meeting the needs of your neighbors on your right and your left. You stop next time you see that person that needs help. Mm-hmm. When a person's shaking a cup with cardboard and says, I need to eat tonight, or veteran or whatever they say, like, give them $5. Figure out what organizations are in your community that are actually making the biggest difference. There are organizations out there that, 80% of the money they bring in is dedicated to keeping their business going, versus every penny getting out, to the front lines. I don't think that every penny of every donation needs to get to the field, but a large majority of it does. 80% of it does. Mm-hmm. And so it just comes back to, it is hypocritical, right? And people say I don't care about social justice because I make comments like this. It is hypocritical for you to be nothing but a mouthpiece that yells at the other side or yells at the broken system when you yourself are not out there like promoting justice with your lifestyle. And promoting justice is not putting posters up or using your social media account to talk about justice. It is giving of your time and your resources to a less advantaged person. Actually doing that, actually giving your time and resources. That's how we take power from the system that is corrupt.
Didn't you say, where were we when you said that you're not sure that Jesus would have voted? Was that on the podcast? Didn't you say that?
I did say that.
Okay. Was that here?
I think it was in a city church environment, but who knows?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's the disposition that I think I see him taking is just if Caesar's coin or Caesar's face is on the back of the coin and he asks for 10% of it or 20% of it, go ahead and give him that because you're a part of, your feet are still on the earth. However, don't forget that God is the one that supplies your needs. And then he, tells Peter, hey, go throw a hook in the water and let me show you how easy it is for God to provide for you. And Peter throws a hook in the water, pulls a fish up, and the fish has a coin in its mouth. And the whole point is don't look to the government to be, just because I told you to give to Caesar what is Caesar's, don't think that Caesar's the one who's primarily responsible for taking care of you.
Okay, so I hear everything that you're saying, and I think it sounds good and nice and easy, but especially for a lot of people who were raised, we were all raised to sort of look to the government, right? Like it's just sort of interwoven into our DNA as a country. But for somebody that's like very politically driven,
sure,
and is listening to this on election day, and maybe their candidate of choice doesn't get elected, what do you say? Like, I hear what you're saying, but it's like, it can be really ingrained in a person.
Sure.
And so it's like, okay, great. I'll give $5 to the person begging, but like, I actually feel like my breath has been taken away because this and this and this might happen now that this person's taking office.
Yeah. This is, I was listening 2 episodes ago, or maybe last episode. Jeff was on with us. Jeff Goings was on with us. If you haven't watched it, you need to watch it. And he referred me to a book that he had read recently. Actually, it was a series of lectures. And I started listening to them. And one of the things that the gentleman said is, when someone is disappointed with another person, they're actually not disappointed with that other person. They're actually disappointed with themselves and their opinion or judgment of that person that it was not correct. Yeah.
Gross.
And it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to government, what I would say to the person in the scenario that you just laid out is, if you cannot sleep because it looks like the candidate of your choice was not elected, more than your fear for the future of this country based on who's in charge, I think you have potential reason to fear, but it's not because of the wrong candidate getting elected. I think the reason why you have potential for fear is because of how much of your power you placed in a person that you do not really know who does not have as much power as you think. And so I think that the thing that I would be asking myself if I'm quote unquote devastated by a result or an action of another person is, what is it in me or what is it about me that led me to give so much power to another person when it comes to my sense of being taken care of, provided for, and well-being.
Okay, I'm about to ruffle a lot of feathers.
Oh, get ready.
But this is the only example I can think of on the spot, so this is the example I'm using.
Yeah.
What about somebody who the government does get to define their lifestyle, like, for example, gay marriage?
Sure.
That is not just like, oh, I have to pay more taxes. That's like, I'm not allowed to marry the person that I want to be married to. That seems like a lot to process for a person.
Sure. And so the question is, what do you say to the person who...
Well, yeah, I mean, you're saying like, okay, if the person that you voted for does not win, you're putting too much power onto that person. But like, they do have power.
Oh,
the government does have power.
There's no doubt about it.
If it's not
There's
just
no
a
doubt
matter of
about
like,
it.
oh, I'm in the high tax bracket and I have to pay more. It's like, I can't legally be married to the person I want to marry. I wish I had another. That's the example I have. I mean, that's a big deal.
Sure.
To a person.
Sure. Well, and that's what I was referring to when the emotion, I can remember sitting in my cell, right, for the first time in my life. And the cell was designed because it was a high-risk facility. It was designed to break people down emotionally from the very get-go, from your clothes coming off and them searching you to being put in your socks, underwear, and T-shirt in a very small, confined, double-doored pit, whatever, like cell that is extremely dirty and extremely cold. It was designed to break people down. And so if you've never been in that situation where all of your power was taken from you and you don't have a choice, like you're forced, it is a horrible feeling. And there are a lot of people experiencing that in our country and all over the world. And you have to do something with that, from a good and evil standpoint. Like you have to come up with or get to, why do these things exist? And you can spend your whole life, and some people have, entertaining the idea of why these realities exist, where one person's life can look this way and another person's life can look entirely this way. And you can't always change that. I mean, there are a lot of books that have been written and a lot of stories that have been told, like Nelson Mandela, who, had to behave in a certain context, had to, like, things were forced on him. And basically, I think the lesson there is, from an energetic standpoint, is you can't always control what is given to you or what is forced upon you, but you can control your response to it. And in a situation, and someone would say, well, that's easy for you to say because look at your life. Well, that's happening in all of our lives. It's just not always the government. When you build organizations and you have a lot of employees, there are times where the nature of the reality of what that organization or the financial condition of that organization is, and again, where it's at, your things are dictated to you. There are things dictated to us all of the time. And we often think that there are some people that get to a place where nothing is dictated to them. That's not true. Realities dictate things to you and force you to make decisions. And it's very uncomfortable. Yeah. Now, I'm not trying to dismiss that we should work as human beings to build a system that promotes fairness, whenever, and justice and equality whenever possible. We just need to understand that there's always going to be people that are disadvantaged, marginalized, and at the bottom of the totem pole that we need to give extra time and attention to, because like you said, months ago, when a house is on fire, not all houses are created equal. We run to the house that's on fire and we give it attention, knowing and believing and hoping that if it ever happens to us, people will run to us too. Mm-hmm. That's good. And so the emotion ship here is, the fear of loss, the fear of not being heard, not being valued. And instead of taking our power and giving it to other people, let's use a lot of that power to try to make a difference today with what's in front of us. And knowing that I have to give someone my power and my emotions in order to be disappointed. I have to empower someone to hurt me. And love has us do that. But from a political standpoint, you can be less devastated when you don't see the government as the primary solution to humanity, to justice, to equality, all of those things.
How about people text us what a way that they helped another person today.
I would love that.
Get some good news we can share.
Yeah,
on the
and
podcast.
we will share it. We will share it. Text us your good news.
Text us your good news.
Until next time.
Oh, okay. We're done.
Do you want to keep going?
What a sign off. No, there was just like, that was abrupt.
Okay.